The space station floated in the darkness between stars. It was a meeting place for many species, a place where different worlds came together to talk and trade. Lieutenant Danny Carter stood by the large window and looked out at the endless black sky. He had been here for 6 months now, working as a cultural liaison officer for the Terran Coalition. His job was simple on paper but difficult in practice. He had to help humans and aliens understand each other. Danny was 32 years old with brown hair that was always a little messy and green eyes that seemed to notice everything. He was not the tallest man or the strongest, but he had a way of making people feel comfortable around him. He smiled easily and laughed often. These were qualities that his fellow humans appreciated, but the aliens on this station viewed them with suspicion. The Volanti were the most powerful species in this part of the galaxy. They had silver skin that seemed to glow softly in any light. Their eyes were deep violet, and when they looked at you, it felt like they could see right through to your soul. They were tall and graceful, moving with a quiet dignity that made humans seem clumsy by comparison. Danny had learned much about the Volanti during his time on the station. They lived for thousands of years. The youngest adult Volanti he had met was over 500 years old. They had conquered disease and ended war among their own kind long ago. They had built an empire that stretched across 3 galaxies. To them, humanity was a young and foolish species, barely worth their attention. Most Volanti treated humans the way an adult might treat a loud and annoying child. They were patient but clearly waiting for the noise to stop. Danny had grown used to their cold stares and dismissive words. He did his job anyway, smiling through their insults and trying to find common ground where none seemed to exist. The reception hall was filled with beings from a dozen different worlds. Danny stood with a group of human diplomats, sharing a joke that made them all laugh loudly. He noticed the Volanti nearby flinching at the sound, their faces showing clear disapproval. Humans were too loud, too emotional, too everything for their taste. That was when he first saw her. She stood apart from the other Volanti, watching the humans with an expression that was different from her kin. There was no contempt in her violet eyes. Instead, Danny saw something that looked almost like curiosity. She was beautiful in the way all Volanti were beautiful, with silver skin and delicate features. But there was something else about her, something that made him look twice. Her name was Lyra, and she was a scientist who studied different species and their behaviors. Danny learned this when she approached him later that evening, which was surprising in itself. Volanti did not usually approach humans for conversation. "You laugh very easily," she said. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Danny smiled at her. "Is that a problem?" "It is unusual. My people do not laugh often. We find it unnecessary." "That sounds sad," Danny said without thinking. He immediately worried he had offended her, but Lyra simply tilted her head, considering his words. Why would the absence of laughter be sad? Because laughter feels good. It connects people. When I laugh with my friends, I feel closer to them. Does your species not have anything like that? Lyra was quiet for a moment. We have rituals that serve similar purposes, but they are formal and structured. There is no spontaneity in them. Maybe that is what you are missing, Danny said. The surprise of it. The joy of something unexpected. She studied him with those deep violet eyes. You are different from what I expected humans to be. Different how? I expected you to be simple. Your species is so young, but you speak of concepts that my people stopped discussing thousands of years ago. Danny felt his cheeks grow warm. He was not used to compliments from Volanti. We may be young, but we think about a lot of things. Probably too much, honestly. Something changed in Lyra's expression. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Danny thought he saw the ghost of a smile on her silver lips. I would like to learn more about how humans think. Would you be willing to meet with me again? Danny knew he should be careful. Relationships between humans and Volanti were complicated at best. But something about Lyra drew him in. Maybe it was her curiosity, or the way she actually seemed to listen when he spoke. Most of Volanti treated human words like background noise. Lyra treated them like they mattered. I would like that, he said. They began meeting regularly after that night. Sometimes they talked in the station's gardens, surrounded by plants from 100 different worlds. Other times they walked through the observation corridors, watching ships come and go against the backdrop of distant stars. Lyra asked endless questions about human life, and Danny did his best to answer them. She wanted to know about human families, about how parents raise children with so much physical affection. The Volanti raised their young in communal centers where emotional attachment was discouraged. She wanted to know about human art, about why humans created paintings and songs that served no practical purpose. The Volanti valued efficiency above all else. Art was considered a waste of time. Most of all, Lyra wanted to know about human emotions. She had read about them in her research, but reading about something and understanding it were very different things. Danny tried to explain what it felt like to be angry, to be sad, to be overwhelmed with joy. Lyra listened with an intensity that surprised him. Your species feels so much, she said one evening as they sat in a quiet corner of the garden. Does it not exhaust you? Danny thought about this. Sometimes it does, but I think feeling things deeply is what makes life worth living. The good feelings and the bad ones. They are all part of being alive. My people would say that you are slaves to your emotions, that they control you instead of the other way around. Maybe they are right, Danny admitted. But I would rather feel too much than feel nothing at all. Lyra was silent for a long time after that. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I have lived for over 2,000 years. In all that time, I have never felt what you describe. I wonder sometimes if my people made a mistake when we chose to suppress our emotions. Danny looked at her, seeing something vulnerable in her expression that he had never seen in a Volanti before. It is never too late to learn, he said gently. She met his eyes, and in that moment, something passed between them. It was not love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something. A connection that neither of them fully understood, but both of them wanted to explore. The other Volanti on the station began to notice Lyra's frequent meetings with the human lieutenant. They whispered among themselves, their perfect faces showing rare hints of disapproval. A Volanti of her standing should not be spending so much time with a member of an inferior species. It was beneath her dignity. But Lyra did not care what they thought. For the first time in her long life, she had found someone who made her question everything she believed. And that was worth more than their approval could ever be. Danny, for his part, found himself thinking about Lyra more and more. He had met many aliens during his career, but none like her. She was brilliant and beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She genuinely wanted to understand him. Not just as a representative of his species, but as an individual. In a galaxy full of beings who dismissed humanity as primitive, Lyra saw something worth knowing. Neither of them knew where this connection would lead. The universe was vast and full of uncertainty. But as they sat together in that garden, watching the artificial stars twinkle above them, both Danny and Lyra felt something they could not quite name. It was the feeling of two very different lives beginning to intertwine, and it was only the beginning. 3 years had passed since Danny and Lyra first met on that space station. What began as curious conversations had grown into something neither of them had expected. They had fallen in love. For Danny, falling in love was natural. Humans did it all the time. They wrote songs about it, made movies about it, built their entire lives around it. But for Lyra, love was a foreign concept. Her people had abandoned such feelings thousands of years ago. They saw emotions as weaknesses, chains that held primitive species back from reaching their true potential. Yet here she was, a scientist from one of the oldest bloodlines in the Volanthe Empire, completely and helplessly in love with a human man who would live for barely a century. Their relationship had not been easy to hide. The space station was full of eyes, and gossip traveled fast among all species. The human diplomats thought Danny was either very brave or very foolish. Most of them assumed the relationship would end badly. Volanthe and humans were too different, they said. It could never work. The Volanthe reaction was far worse. Lyra's family refused to speak to her after they learned of her relationship. Her mother sent a single message that contained only 4 words: "You disgrace our name." Her father said nothing at all, which somehow hurt even more. Only her younger brother, Kale, remained in contact, and even he seemed confused by her choices. "I do not understand," Kale told her during one of their rare video calls. "He will be dead in what feels like a moment to us. Why would you attach yourself to something so temporary?" "Because temporary does not mean worthless," Lyra replied. "Humans live short lives, but they live them fully. They feel everything so deeply. Being with Danny has shown me things I never knew I was missing." Kale shook his head slowly. "The elders will not approve. They may summon you to the council. Let them summon me. I have done nothing wrong." But even as she said these words, Lyra knew the situation was more complicated than she admitted. The Volanthe High Council did not take kindly to members of noble bloodlines mixing with lesser species. There would be consequences, sooner or later. Danny knew all of this. Lyra had told him everything about her people's customs and expectations. She had explained how her family had disowned her, how her career might be ruined, how she might lose everything she had worked for over 2,000 years. And still, he stayed. "Are you sure about this?" he asked her one night as they walked through the station's botanical garden. The artificial moonlight cast silver shadows on the alien plants around them. "You are giving up so much to be with me." Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. "Let me ask you something, Danny. Before you met me, were you happy?" He thought about it. "I guess I was content. I had a good job, good friends. But happy? I do not know. Maybe I did not think about it much." "I thought about it constantly," Lyra said. "For centuries, I wondered why my life felt so empty, despite having everything my people consider valuable. Wealth, status, knowledge. I had it all. But none of it made me feel the way I feel when I am with you." Danny took her hands in his. Her skin was cool and smooth, so different from human skin. "And how do you feel when you are with me?" "Alive," she said simply. "For the first time in over 2,000 years, I feel truly alive." He kissed her then, under the artificial stars, surrounded by flowers from worlds they would never visit together. It was a simple kiss, gentle and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Lyra was crying. It was the first time Danny had ever seen her cry. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Nothing is wrong. These are happy tears. I read about them in human literature, but never understood until now." She laughed softly, wiping her silver cheeks. "Your species has so many ways to express joy. We have none." Danny smiled and pulled her close. "Then I will teach you all of them." 1 month later, Danny proposed. He did not have a ring because Volanthe did not wear jewelry. He did not have money or status or any of the things that might impress an ancient and powerful being. What he had was a small wooden box that his grandfather had carved by hand back on Earth, and inside it was a letter. The letter took him 3 days to write. He wrote draft after draft, throwing away pages filled with words that did not feel right. How do you tell someone that you love them more than you ever thought possible? How do you promise forever to someone who will outlive you by thousands of years? In the end, Danny kept it simple. He wrote about the first time he saw her across the reception hall and knew that she was different. He wrote about all the conversations that followed, how she made him think about things he had never considered before. He wrote about the way she tilted her head when she was curious, and how her rare smiles lit up his entire world. He wrote about his fears, his hopes, and his absolute certainty that whatever time they had together would be worth everything. Lyra read the letter on the observation deck, with the light of a distant nebula painting colors across her face. Her hands trembled as she turned each page. When she finished, she was crying again. "Your people put so much meaning into such fragile things," she said. Holding the letter like it was the most precious object in the universe. "That is what makes them precious," Danny replied. He took a deep breath and got down on one knee, the way humans had done for centuries. "Lyra, I know I cannot offer you forever. I am human, and my time is short compared to yours. But I can offer you every single day I have left. Will you marry me?" She did not hesitate. Yes, the wedding was small and quiet. They held it in a private room on the station, with a view of the stars through a large window. Only a handful of guests attended. Danny's friends from the human delegation were there, along with a few aliens who had grown fond of the unlikely couple. The only Volante present was Kale, who stood in the corner looking uncomfortable but determined to support his sister. There was no priest or official from either culture willing to perform the ceremony, so they spoke their vows to each other, making up the words as they went along. Danny promised to love her for every second of his short life. Lyra promised to carry their love with her for as long as she existed. When it was over, they were husband and wife. Two beings from different worlds, bound together by something that neither species fully understood. The celebration afterward was awkward but genuine. The humans drank too much and got loud, as humans often did. Kale watched them with a mixture of fascination and horror. Lyra found herself laughing at their antics, truly laughing in a way she had never done before. The sound surprised everyone in the room, including herself. "I never knew you could laugh like that," Kale said to her later, when the party had quieted down. "Neither did I," Lyra admitted. "Danny taught me." Her brother looked at her for a long moment. "You are different now. I do not recognize the sister I grew up with. Is that a bad thing?" Kale thought about it. "I do not know yet. But I think perhaps our people lost something important long ago. And you may have found it again." That night, Danny and Lyra retired to their quarters as a married couple. They lay together in the darkness, listening to the soft hum of the station around them. Danny was almost asleep when Lyra spoke. "I want to tell you something," she whispered. "What is it?" "Before I met you, I spent centuries studying human emotions from a distance. I thought I understood them, but I was wrong." She turned to look at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Love is not what I expected. It is not a weakness or a primitive impulse. It is the strongest thing I have ever felt. And I am grateful that you showed me what it means." Danny smiled and kissed her forehead. "I am grateful too." They fell asleep in each other's arms, two hearts from different worlds beating together in the silence of space. Outside their window, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small miracle that had occurred on this unremarkable station. But for Danny and Lyra, nothing about this night was small or unremarkable. It was the beginning of their life together, and despite all the challenges they knew awaited them, neither of them had ever felt more certain about anything. Love, they had discovered, did not care about species or lifespans or ancient traditions. It simply was, burning bright against the cold darkness of the universe. And for as long as they had together, they would nurture that flame and watch it grow. 10 years had passed since the wedding. Danny and Lyra had left the space station behind and built a home on a small colony world called New Haven. It was a quiet place, far from the politics of the Terran Coalition and the judgment of the Volanthi Empire. Here, they could simply be a husband and wife, living their lives together in peace. Their home was a simple structure made of local wood and stone, surrounded by gardens that Lyra tended with surprising care. She had never grown anything before meeting Danny. Volanthi lived in cities of metal and crystal, where nature was controlled and contained. But Danny had taught her the joy of putting seeds in dirt and watching them become flowers. She found it beautiful in a way she could not fully explain. Danny was 42 years old now. The first gray hairs had appeared at his temples, and fine lines had formed around his eyes. He moved a little slower than he used to, and he got tired more easily. These were normal signs of human aging, things that every member of his species experienced. But for Lyra, watching them happen to her husband was painful beyond words. She looked exactly the same as she had on their wedding day. Her silver skin was smooth and flawless. Her violet eyes were bright and clear. She would look this way for thousands of years after Danny was gone. This thought haunted her in the quiet moments, when she lay awake at night listening to his breathing and trying not to think about the future. Danny knew what she was feeling. He had always known that this would be the hardest part of their relationship. Not the cultural differences or the disapproval of others, but the simple fact that he would grow old and die while she remained unchanged. He tried to make peace with it, but some nights, when he caught her looking at him with sadness in her eyes, the reality of their situation hit him like a physical blow. "Stop that," he said one morning, when he noticed her watching him struggle to get out of bed. His back had been bothering him lately, an old injury from his military days acting up. "Stop what?" Lyra asked, trying to look innocent. "Looking at me like I am already dying. I have a sore back, not a terminal illness." She came to his side and helped him stand, her cool hands gentle on his warm skin. "I am sorry. I cannot help it. Every small change reminds me that our time is limited." Danny took her face in his hands and looked into her eyes. "Our time has always been limited. That is true for everyone, whether they live 80 years or 8,000. What matters is what we do with the time we have." "Your human philosophy again," she said, but she was smiling now. "It is not philosophy. It is just common sense. If I spent every day worrying about dying, I would forget to live. And I refuse to waste a single day with you." He kissed her, and for a moment, the shadow of the future lifted. They were just two people in love, standing in their kitchen on a quiet morning, grateful for each other's presence. But the shadow always returned as the years passed. Danny's aging became more noticeable. His hair turned completely gray, then white. His face grew lined and weathered. He walked with a slight limp now, the result of a fall that had healed slowly. He needed glasses to read, and his hearing was not as sharp as it used to be. Lyra adapted to each change, caring for him with a devotion that surprised even herself. She had never nursed another being in her life. Volanthi did not get sick the way humans did, and when they were injured, they healed quickly. But Danny needed her help more and more as time went on, and she gave it willingly. Their neighbors on New Haven knew them well by now. The human colony had accepted the odd couple without much fuss. There were other mixed-species marriages on the planet, though none quite as unusual as a human and a Volanthi. People waved to them in the market and invited them to community events. For the first time in her long life, Lyra felt like she belonged somewhere. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Lyra finally spoke the words she had been holding inside for years. "I will have to watch you die." Danny did not look surprised. He had been expecting this conversation for a long time. "Yes, how can you be so calm about it?" He thought about his answer carefully. "I am not calm. The thought of leaving you alone scares me more than anything else. But being afraid would not change anything. I am human. Humans die. That is just how it is. It is not fair, Lyra said, and her voice broke on the last word. We should have more time. Danny reached over and took her hand. His skin was thin and papery now, spotted with age. Her hand looked exactly as it had on their first meeting, smooth and silver and perfect. The contrast was painful to see. Listen to me, he said firmly. We have had more time than most people ever get. 20 years of real happiness. How many beings in this universe can say that? How many of your own people have ever felt what we feel for each other? Lyra had no answer for that. She knew the truth. Most Volanti went through their endless lives without ever experiencing love. They had children through arranged partnerships, raised them without attachment, and moved through the centuries in a state of comfortable numbness. They did not know what they were missing, so they never mourned its absence. Would you trade our years together for anything? Danny asked. No, she said immediately. Never. Then do not wish for something different. We have what we have, and what we have is precious. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling his warmth, listening to his heartbeat. I am afraid, she admitted. I do not know how to be without you. You will learn, Danny said gently. You are the strongest person I know, Lyra. You gave up everything to be with me. Your family, your career, your place in Volanti society. You did all of that because you believed our love was worth it. And when I am gone, you will carry that love with you. It will not end just because I do. Tears rolled down her silver cheeks. How do humans bear this? Knowing that everyone they love will die? We do not bear it. Not really. We just keep living anyway. We cry, we grieve, we remember. And then we find new things to love, new reasons to keep going. That is the human way. It sounds exhausting. Danny laughed, a warm sound despite his aging voice. It is, but it is also beautiful. Every moment matters because nothing lasts forever. Every smile is precious because there will only be so many. Your people chose to escape that pain by escaping love itself. But I think they paid too high a price. Lyra thought about his words for a long time. She thought about her parents, who had been together for 3,000 years but had never truly known each other. She thought about her colleagues at the research station, brilliant minds who created wonders but found no joy in their work. She thought about all the Volanti she had ever known, and realized that none of them had ever looked at another being the way Danny looked at her. I would not trade a single day, she said finally. Danny smiled. The same crooked smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. Neither would I. They sat together until the stars came out, two small figures against the vast darkness of the universe. Danny eventually fell asleep in his chair, as he often did these days. Lyra stayed awake, watching him breathe, counting his heartbeats like they were precious gems. She knew now that loving a human was the most difficult thing she had ever done. It meant accepting loss as an inevitable part of the journey. It meant knowing that the joy would end, that the grief would come, that nothing could stop the passage of time, but she also knew that she would do it all again in a heartbeat. Because Danny had given her something no amount of years could provide. He had shown her what it meant to truly live. And that gift was worth any price. The night deepened around them, peaceful and still. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out to its mate. Lyra closed her eyes and listened, finding comfort in the sound. Life went on, even in the darkness. And as long as she had Danny beside her, she would face whatever came with courage and gratitude. Their love story was not over yet. There were still chapters to be written, moments to be treasured, memories to be made. And Lyra intended to cherish every single one. The summons arrived on a cold morning in autumn. A Volanti ship appeared in the sky above New Haven, sleek and silver, hovering like a predator waiting to strike. The message was formal and brief. Lyra was to appear before the High Council to answer for her actions. Her presence was not requested. It was demanded. Danny read the message 3 times before he could speak. They cannot force you to go. Yes, they can, Lyra said quietly. I am still a citizen of the Volanthi Empire. Ignoring a council summons would make me an outlaw. They could strip me of everything, even my name. Would that be so bad? You have a life here now. A home. You do not need them. Lyra looked at him with sad eyes. It is not that simple. If I become an outlaw, they will never leave us alone. They will watch our home, monitor our communications, make our lives difficult in 1,000 small ways. The council does not forgive defiance. Danny's jaw tightened. He was 65 years old now, his body worn down by time, but his spirit was as strong as ever. Then we faced them together. Danny, no. You cannot come with me. The council chambers are on the homeworld. The journey alone would be hard on your body, and they will not treat you kindly. I do not care how they treat me. You are my wife. I am not letting you face those people alone. They argued for hours, but in the end, Danny won. He had always been stubborn, and age had only made him more so. They boarded a transport ship the next day and began the long journey to the Volanthi homeworld. The planet was called Vareth Prime, and it was the heart of the Volanthi Empire. Danny had seen images of it before, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The cities were made of crystal and light, towering structures that seemed to defy gravity. Everything was clean and perfect and cold. There were no children playing in the streets, no artists painting on corners, no musicians filling the air with song. Just endless silent beauty that felt more like a museum than a place where people lived. Lyra guided him through the spotless streets, drawing stares from every Volanthi they passed. A human on Vareth Prime was rare enough. A human walking beside a daughter of one of the oldest bloodlines was unheard of. Danny ignored their looks and kept his head high. He was not ashamed of who he was or who he loved. The council chamber was a vast hall of white stone and floating crystals. 7 elders sat on elevated platforms, their ancient faces as cold and hard as the walls around them. The High Counselor was named Veth, and he had lived for over 12,000 years. Looking at him, Danny could believe it. There was something deeply inhuman about his eyes, as if he had forgotten what it meant to feel anything at all. Lyra of the House of Vel, Veth said, his voice echoing through the chamber. You have been summoned to answer for your corruption. Lyra stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her. I have done nothing wrong, High Counselor. You have bound yourself to a human. You have allowed yourself to be infected by their primitive emotions. You have brought shame upon your bloodline and your people. Veth's violet eyes swept over Danny with obvious disgust. And you have brought this creature into our sacred halls. This creature is my husband, Lyra said firmly. His name is Daniel Carter, and he has more wisdom and courage than anyone I have ever known. A murmur rippled through the council. One of the other elders, a female named Syrah, leaned forward. You speak of a being who will be dead within decades. What wisdom can such a short-lived species possibly possess? Danny stepped forward before Lyra could stop him. Permission to address the council. Veth's eyes narrowed. You presume to speak here, human? With respect, High Counselor, you have just called me primitive and short-lived. I think I have earned the right to defend myself. The chamber fell silent. Danny could feel every eye on him. Ancient beings who had watched stars being born and die, looking at him like he was an insect. But he had faced worse odds in his life. He had fought in wars, survived disasters, and married an alien against all expectations. These old fossils did not scare him. You call our emotions weaknesses, Danny said. his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. You say that love and attachment are chains that hold primitive species back. But I look at you, and I see something far worse than weakness. I see emptiness. Another murmur, louder this time. Veth raised a hand for silence. You live for thousands of years, Danny continued. You have conquered disease and ended war, and built an empire that spans galaxies. But what do you actually live for? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What makes you smile? What brings you joy? None of the council members answered. Their faces remained blank, unreadable. My wife has told me about your history. Your people used to sing songs and tell stories. You used to create art for no reason other than the pleasure of creating. You used to love each other so deeply that you would cross the stars to be together. But somewhere along the way, you decided that all of that made you weak. So you cut it out of yourselves like a disease. Danny took another step forward, his old bones protesting, but his spirit burning bright. I am going to die. Probably within the next 20 years, if I am lucky. And yes, my wife will grieve when I am gone. She will feel pain that you cannot imagine. But that pain will be proof that our time together mattered. That I mattered. Can any of you say the same about your own lives? He looked at each council member in turn, meeting their ancient eyes without flinching. You have lived for thousands of years, but you have never truly lived at all. You have survived, but survival without meaning is just another kind of death. My people may die young, but we die knowing that we loved and were loved in return. That is worth more than all your empty centuries combined. The silence that followed was absolute. Danny could hear his own heartbeat, his own breath, the soft rustle of his clothing. The council members looked at each other, and for the first time, Danny saw something like uncertainty in their faces. Veth spoke first, his voice quieter than before. You speak boldly for a mortal creature. I speak the truth. Your people have forgotten what matters. My wife reminded me of that when she chose to love me despite everything she had been taught. She is braver than anyone in this room, including me. Lyra reached out and took his hand. Her cool silver fingers wrapped around his weathered palm, and she squeezed gently. Danny squeezed back. This council was prepared to exile Lyra from the Empire, Veth said slowly, to strip her of her name and her heritage. But your words have given us pause. He turned to the other elders. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our judgment. Cirrus spoke up. The human makes a troubling argument. If what he says is true, then we have lost something important. We should not make decisions while clouded by doubt. The council debated among themselves for what felt like hours. Danny and Lara stood together, waiting, hoping. Finally, Veth raised his hand again. We will not exile Lyra. We will not strip her of her name. But we will be watching this union closely. If the human's words are true, then perhaps there is something to be learned here. If they are false, then time will reveal the deception. It was not acceptance. It was not approval. But it was enough. As they left the council chamber, Lyra leaned close to Danny and whispered, You were magnificent. Danny smiled, exhaustion written on every line of his face. I was terrified. You did not show it. That is the human way. We are always scared. We just do things anyway. They walked out of the Crystal City together, hand in hand, two unlikely allies against an empire of cold perfection. Behind them, the council members sat in silence, each lost in thoughts they had not allowed themselves to think for thousands of years. Danny had planted a seed. Only time would tell if it would grow. The years after the council hearing passed like water through open fingers. Danny and Lyra returned to their home on New Haven and lived quietly, treasuring each day as the gift it was. The Volanthi watched them from afar, as promised, but they did not interfere. Something had shifted in the empire, a small crack in the foundation of certainty that had stood for millennia. Danny's health declined slowly but steadily. By his 75th birthday, he needed help with most daily tasks. His hands shook when he held a cup. His memories sometimes wandered to places and times long past. But his love for Lyra remained constant, a light that no amount of physical decay could dim. Lyra became his caretaker, his nurse, his constant companion. She learned to cook the human foods he loved, even though she had no need for food herself. She read to him in the evenings, old Earth novels about adventure and romance and the triumph of good over evil. She held him during the long nights when pain kept him awake, whispering words of comfort in 2 languages. Their home became a place of pilgrimage for an unlikely group of visitors. Young Vellante, curious about the human who had defied their counsel, would sometimes appear at their door asking questions. Danny welcomed them all, sharing stories about Earth, about humanity, about the meaning he had found in his short life. Lyra watched these conversations with quiet pride, seeing her husband's words plant seeds in minds that had been closed for centuries. Cale visited often, staying for weeks at a time. He had changed since the council hearing, becoming more open, more willing to question the beliefs he had been raised with. He and Danny would sit on the porch for hours, discussing everything from philosophy to fishing. When Cale laughed at one of Danny's terrible jokes, Lyra felt her heart swell with hope for her people's future. One spring morning, Danny woke up and knew that his time was running out. There was no specific symptom, no sudden pain. He simply knew, the way all living things eventually know, that the end was near. He had made peace with death long ago, but now that it was finally here, he felt a deep sadness for the one he would leave behind. "Lyra," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "I need to tell you something." She was by his side immediately, her violet eyes searching his face. She saw the truth there before he could speak. "No," she whispered. "Not yet. Please, not yet." "I do not think I get to choose," Danny said with a weak smile. "The universe has its own schedule." Lyra climbed onto the bed beside him, careful not to jostle his fragile body. She wrapped her arms around him, held on tight, as if she could keep death away through sheer will. "I am not ready. Neither am I, but I do not think anyone ever is." He stroked her silver hair with a trembling hand. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you will not close yourself off again. What we had was rare and beautiful, but it does not have to end with me. You have thousands of years ahead of you. Do not spend them in grief." Tears streamed down Lyra's face. "How can you ask me that? You are everything to me." "No, I am part of you. The most important part, maybe. But I am not everything. You were someone before you met me, and you will be someone after I am gone. Someone who knows what love feels like. Someone who can teach others what you learned." He coughed, a wet rattling sound that made them both wince. "That is my gift to you. Take it and share it with the universe." They lay together in silence for a long time after that. The sun moved across the sky, casting patterns of light and shadow on the bedroom walls. Danny drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes murmuring names from his past, sometimes simply breathing. Lyra did not move, did not speak, did not do anything except hold her husband and memorize every sensation of his presence. As night fell, Danny opened his eyes and looked at her with sudden clarity. "Lyra, I need to ask you something." "Yes, my love." "Do you regret it? Choosing me? Giving up everything for a man who would leave you so soon?" Lyra leaned close, her lips brushing against his ear, and whispered the words that would stay with her for the rest of her long existence. "In 2,000 years of life, I never truly lived until I met you. And when you are gone, I will carry you with me until the stars themselves burn out. You taught me what it means to be mortal, and that was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. I do not regret a single heartbeat." Danny smiled, the same crooked grin that had captured her heart all those years ago on a distant space station. "That is the most human thing you have ever said." She laughed through her tears, a sound that was equal parts joy and sorrow. "I learned from the best." He closed his eyes then, and his breathing began to slow. Lyra held him closer, feeling his warmth, listening to his heart, counting each precious beat as it faded. She was there when the last breath left his body, there when the rhythm stopped, there when the man she loved more than anything in the universe slipped away from her forever. She stayed in that bed until morning, holding him, grieving, remembering. When the sun finally rose, painting the room in shades of gold and pink, she pressed one final kiss to his forehead and whispered goodbye. The funeral was small but meaningful. Humans and Volanthi stood side by side as Danny's body was returned to the earth he had loved so much. Cale spoke, his voice steady despite the tears on his silver cheeks. He talked about the human who had taught him to question everything he thought he knew. Lyra did not speak at the funeral. She did not need to. Everyone there knew what Danny had meant to her, what they had meant to each other. Words would have been inadequate. In the months that followed, Lyra threw herself into a new purpose. She began writing about her husband, about their love, about everything she had learned from him. The book became required reading in certain Volanthi academic circles, sparking debates that had not occurred in thousands of years. Was emotion truly a weakness? Was love a primitive impulse or something more profound? She traveled back to Vareth Prime and spoke before the council again, this time as a teacher rather than a defendant. She told them about Danny's courage, his wisdom, his refusal to accept their cold definition of superiority. She told them about the joy of human laughter and the beauty of human tears. She told them about the terror and the wonder of loving something that would not last. Some of the council members dismissed her words, but others listened. And in the years that followed, something began to change in the Volanthi Empire. Young people started asking questions their parents had never asked. Art began to appear in public spaces for the first time in millennia. There were even reports of Volanthi falling in love, actually in love, not just forming practical partnerships. Lyra lived for another 4,000 years after Danny's death. She never remarried, but she was never alone. She surrounded herself with beings who shared her belief in the value of emotion, in the importance of connection. She watched the universe change, slowly, one mind at a time. On her final day, Lyra returned to New Haven. She sat on the porch of the home she had shared with Danny, now a museum dedicated to their legacy. She watched the sunset, thinking about a crook smile and a pair of green eyes that had seen through all her defenses to the heart hidden beneath. "I kept my promise," she said to the empty air. "I shared your gift with everyone I could." A warm breeze rustled through the garden, and Lyra could almost believe it was Danny's hand touching her face. One last time, she closed her eyes and let go. They found her the next morning, at peace, with a smile on her silver lips. In her hand was a small wooden box, carved by human hands over 4,000 years before, still containing a folded letter that spoke of a love that would never truly end. The universe continued its endless dance. Stars being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling. But somewhere in the vastness of space, there was a story that would never be forgotten. The story of a human who taught an ancient species how to feel, and an alien who learned that the most precious things in existence are the ones that do not last forever. Their love echoed through the ages, a beacon of hope for anyone who wondered if connection between different beings was possible. And in quiet moments, when the stars aligned just right, some said you could still hear them laughing together. Two souls forever intertwined in the eternal fabric of the universe. The end was also a beginning, and their story lived on.